Test? Yes! Hai visto?
Pronto, 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 prova, prova. Eccoci. Mamma che ritardo che ha.
Quindi voi potete tranquillamente parlare da qui con il microfono.
Pronto?
Dario.
Boh.
Come mai a me non lo faceva? Allora, Dario, make presente.
C'è una via di mezzo? Così è troppo alto, vedi?
Prova. No, si sente.
Prova, 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 prova. 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 Prova.
Va bene, allora questa...
So we start with video.
Well, actually, I could say something at the beginning, yes. By the way, there are stickers here. They are gratis. Please take some.
Are they Europe?
I don't know if they're legal because they're not practical works. These are works of expressing views. And they don't have to be eternal. But you can have them if you want to. I have a homework assignment for you. Take these stickers and put them up in the Department of Computing. The Department of Computing, I have told, has been conquered by the dark lords.
I will put it on my Windows PC.
Actually, what you should do is remove Windows from your Windows PC. Free yourself if you can't free anyone else. So this is a very simple test. Yes.
We have masks there. Face masks on the. a big company, big protection.
Yeah. I decided I want protections. I am old, I'm overweight, and I have type 2 diabetes, so I'm rather vulnerable.
I understand.
And most people would say I shouldn't be traveling by planes and trains and buses, but I have to basically give up my life if I do that. Daniela?
Free software is the first battle in the liberation of cyberspace. Who controls your computer? Is it you? Or is it some big company that's really controlling it? Well, what is a computer? A computer is a universal machine. It will do any computation you want it to because you give it a program that says what the computation is that you want. So the computer only knows how to get out an instruction and do it, and get out another instruction and do it. The program has the instructions. It says what to do. And so you, by writing the right program, you can make it do anything. Well, almost anything. So who gives the instructions to your computer? You might think it's obeying your instructions, when really it's obeying somebody else first. And you, only as much as that company wants it to, will let it listen to you. With software, there are two possibilities. Either the users control the program, or the program controls the users. It's inevitably one or the other. So, in order for the users to control the program, they need the 4 essential freedoms. And that's the definition of free software. Free software respects the user's freedom and community. Now, we often call it using the French or Spanish word, pronounce it as you like. The point is, that's what we need. We don't need as rights. We're not talking about rights. We're concerned with your freedom. And we sometimes say free/eager to show that. So, freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish, for whatever purpose. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code of the program and change it so it does the computer you want it to do. But what is the source code? Well, every program typically will have two forms. There's the form that you can read and you can understand if you know the programming language. That's the source. That's what programmers are writing to change. Then there's the executable, which is a bunch of numbers which even a programmer can't figure out. If all you get is the executable, it's a horrible pain in the neck to figure out what it does, and even harder to change it. So, to give you the real possibility to study and change it, they've got to give you the source code. That's a requirement. Well, with those two freedoms, each user separately can make a copy and start changing it and make it do what she wants. That's individual control. But what if you're not a programmer? You look at the source code and you don't understand it. Individual control isn't enough. We also need collective control, which means any group of users can do the work together to adapt the program to what they want. Of course, in the group, some of them are programmers. They're the ones who actually write the changes, but they do it as part of the group for what the group wants. Of course, the group doesn't have to be everybody. Some others can use it some other way. They're all free to do that. So, collective control requires two more essential freedoms. Freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute exact copies, to make the copies and then give them away or sell them when you wish. And freedom 3 is similar, but it's for your modified versions. You're free to make copies and give them or sell them when you wish. So, if you do have these freedoms, then it's free software. The users control the program. But if any of those freedoms is missing, then the users don't control the program. Instead, the program controls the users. And the developer controls the program. So that means this program is an instrument of unjust power for its developer over the users. That means the users don't have freedom. That's non-free proprietary software, which we got to get rid of. Well, when you've got proprietary software, what happens? Sometimes the program excludes on the user. Sometimes it tracks the user. Sometimes it restricts the user and stops users from doing what they want to do. You can see that the blue ray is your enemy. Sometimes the software remotely deletes books, as Amazon did with 1984. Sometimes the developer compels users to install a harmful upgrade by threatening to take away other functionality if it's not installed, as Sony did. And sometimes they can even forcibly change the software at a distance, as Microsoft can with Windows through the universal backdoor. So sometimes they even sabotage users, as Microsoft does when it tells the NSA about bugs in Windows so it can use them to attack people's computers. Well, what you get is basically, with proprietary software, the owner has power over the users and takes advantage of this power, putting in those various malicious functionalities to hurt the users. Of course, they don't do this because they're sadists. They're doing it just for money, for greed. They have various ways that they can profit from having this power over users, which does not make it even the tiniest bit less evil. But they have no shame about it. They have conferences where they talk about the latest ways they can take advantage of users through the power they have. Now, basically, proprietary software, which is now from almost all the users of proprietary software, they're using proprietary malware. It's software for suckers. So how do you stop being a victim? Formally, you have to stop using computers, but not anymore. Now you can come join us in the free world that we built. In 1983, I announced I would develop a completely free software operating system called GNU. In 1992, we had it almost finished, but one piece was missing, the kernel. Linus Torvalds in that year freed his kernel Linux, which filled the last gap and gave us the first. Unfortunately, having freedom at one point doesn't guarantee you'll keep it. There are over 1,000 different variants of gnu+linux distributions. A few of them are entirely free software. Most of them have non-free software added because they're maintained by people who aren't concerned about freedom. They'd rather add convenience but at the cost of freedom. So you have to check which is a free distro. To keep your freedom sometimes requires a sacrifice, sometimes a big sacrifice, as at Lexington. Sometimes, but in our campaign, it tends to be little sacrifices. Anybody with a little bit of maturity can make these sacrifices. For instance, you want applications, but some of them are not free. If you want freedom, you got to do without them. So there may be some inconveniences you have to suffer for your freedom's sake. Then many websites send non-free programs written in JavaScript to the user's browser. If you don't want to run non-free programs, you should install BigBlueButton, which keeps out non-free JavaScript. And sometimes servers will offer to do your computing. They say, send us all your data. Obviously, for suckers, then the server does the computing and sends you back the results. But you're not supposed to think about what's happening because it's a cloud and you don't see what's going on. Well, you should look. It's software as a service as a software substitute, and it takes away control of your computing. So, a large fraction of the world's web servers are running gnu+linux and other free software. But I think the most important computers to put freedom in are your computers, not companies' web servers. They deserve freedom also, but above all, it's people that deserve freedom. So we need to advance, and to do that, we have to cross obstacles. One of them is there are big companies that make a lot of money by having control over users, and they don't want to let us advance. We have to overcome their opposition. Another is that the mainstream media don't talk about free software. They have a term that they use to bury these ethical issues. They say open source instead. Now, it talks about more or less the same programs, but with different ideas. Where free software activists say, this is a matter of right and wrong. Users deserve freedom, we demand freedom. The people who say open source, they don't want to say that. So instead they say, let the users change the software and redistribute it, and they'll make the code better. They'll fix some bugs. It may be true, but it's a less important issue. If we want to keep our freedom, we've got to talk about freedom. So say free software, and you're helping us every time. Another obstacle is that lots of schools teach non-free software, which is basically like teaching kids to smoke tobacco. It's implanting dependence, which is the opposite of what schools should do. A school should prepare citizens to live in a strong, capable, independent, cooperating, and free society, which means teaching free software in the school. But there's another reason to do that for education. Some kids want to become programmers. They're curious. They want to know how the programs work. Well, the one who's studying a free software can understand it. The one who's studying a non-free program can't learn anything because the knowledge in the non-free program is withheld, denied to the students. So to uphold the spirit of education, the school should make sure its programs are free. But there's an even more important reason. Schools should teach the spirit of goodwill, the habit of helping other people. So the class should say, if you bring a program to class, just as if you bring cookies to class, you've got to share it with everyone else. You can't keep it to yourself. You've got to share the source code so other people can learn. So don't put any proprietary software to this class. The school has to set a good example by following its own rule to bring only free software to class, except as a reverse engineering exercise. Another obstacle is there's hardware we don't know how to write free software for because they won't tell us how to use the hardware. That's shocking. They want to sell you the product and they won't tell you how to use it. They say, here's a non-free program you can use, run it and shut up, don't bother us. Well, how do you find out how to run that hardware? With reverse engineering, you're the first ones to figure out what they really do and write down how to use that hardware so someone else can write a free program to do it. It's hard work, but it can be done. If you want to make a big technical contribution, that's what you should do. Each new area, activity of life can bring with it new human rights that are necessary. And the human rights depend on each other. If you lose one, it becomes harder to maintain the others. So nowadays, computing is so important in society that the freedoms of free software are among the human rights that society must establish and protect. Thus, how? Well, you can write free software. You can organize groups to campaign and persuade schools and governments to move to free software. You can help other people when they have trouble using free software or help them install it. You can say free software and spread the philosophical ideas. Moving to free software is the first step in the liberation of cyberspace. But of course, we also use the internet. We need other freedoms there, like network neutrality and putting an end to surveillance of people in general. Thank you for coming. Is it my fault?
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone for being here, and thank you to Richard Stallman to be here again in Pisa. It is giving me a bittersweet feeling to have Richard Stallman here today. Sweet because this time the conference is organized by a couple of political philosophers working in the Department of Political Science. And this is a recognition that software is a kind of language organizing and shaping our world. It's not just a technical and business issue. It is about free culture. It is about free speech, and it is a freedom that deserves to be understood and protected, even at the point of starting a copyright, like Richard Stallman did. But the interest comes from the fact that most Italian universities are no longer the cradle of free thinking, because they are using or they are being used by proprietary clouds and software. At the point that when we had to switch to remote teaching during the academics, we were recommended as teachers to use Microsoft Teams and Google Classroom. And now we are using BigBlueButton, that is free software, and executing RC is working perfectly. Now I switch to Italian to give you some indicazioni di comportamento. Allora, Richard Stallman è un pochino sordo, mi ha detto, quindi gradirebbe che voi scriveste le vostre domande in inglese su un foglietto di carta, in maniera tale che questo foglietto di carta I colleghi sono
It's at the top level.
disponibili,
But wait, this is not my memory. This is other stuff. So let me look.
This is
Okay, let me look at what's going on here. I can't read anything from so far away.
una pausa di 5 minuti e poi ci sarà la tradizionale.
Oh, I see. It starts with the word learning.
Se avete voglia di partecipare all'asta, potete.
Maybe after IMG. Leaning toward Pisa. Of course, and copy it.
Dicevo, i foglietti per scrivere le vostre domande le metto qui al primo banco, le domande in inglese, io ve lo dico in italiano perché sia chiaro a tutti. Grazie mille per la collaborazione, grazie anche a voi per essere qui.
Thank you. Not only that, I have the microphone. And the floor is down there, hard to use. So, free software and the freedoms it gives are essential for people to avoid being subjugated by the powerful. Most people don't understand this. They've been taught to think of whatever they do with their computers, and by the way, so-called smartphones are computers. Don't imagine that there's something different. They're computers in a small package, and they are entirely under the power of companies. And in most cases, you can't install any other operating system, and nearly all the programs you can run on them are non-free, and many of them are malicious. Nowadays, almost all non-free programs meant for the general public to use are designed to mistreat the user. They are malware. And this includes almost all the apps distributed for Snoop phones. So don't think that this doesn't affect you because you don't have a laptop or a desktop computer. It does affect anyone who was willing to have a Snoop phone. I don't. I found out 20 years ago how badly the phones of that era mistreat the user, and I said, no, I refuse to have one, and I still refuse to have one because I value my freedom. If someone wants me to do something with a Snoop phone, I say, count me out. But in any case, people have come to ignore the way they're being mistreated. And you can tell that they're intentionally doing so at some level, because frequently these devices cause inconvenience for people in the moment, and they get angry at the inconvenience. But they don't see that those inconveniences systematically result from the fact that the users can't change anything. If the users could change these programs, they would make these programs less inconvenient. Why are they so inconvenient? Because they're doing what some company wants them to do to the user, rather than what the users want done for them. Now, if users understood how badly they're being treated, they would organize to say, put an end to this. We demand to have control over the programs we run. We demand security for us instead of security against us. Most discussions of security that you find going on start with a twisted idea of what security means. It's the idea of security that the companies use. And what they mean is security for the company's power. They say that security is supposed to prevent anyone from doing anything that shakes or undermines the company's power over users, which is not the same thing as the kind of security a user might reasonably wish for, which is to have control over her own computing and not let anyone else, such as a company, interfere with that control. So when companies say our system is more secure, or we have to do this to you for the sake of security, they don't mean security for you. See, that's an annoyance being caused by a snoop. But users have been taught to think of the many inconveniences as individual annoyances rather than part of a systemic problem, a problem of a badly designed system that wasn't designed to be good for people. It was designed to attract them in, not to treat them well. And you can see this especially in education. A few years ago, schools typically made students do some things using computers. And almost always those schools were requiring, or at least suggesting, non-free software running on non-free operating systems. And these systems snoop on the students. And parents tried to sue in the United States. Some parents, those who were more aware than most. There is a law in the US saying that schools may not give data to outsiders for the sake of the students' privacy. Well, the companies came up with a clever idea. They had the schools sign a contract saying that the company is considered an officer of the school. The officers of the school have an exception under the law. They can see whatever data they want. So if the school pretends that some company, like it could be Google, is an officer of the school, the law ceases to protect the privacy of the students. So this became standard practice, and in the past few years, partly under the influence of the panic about the deaths being caused by COVID-19, they quickly allowed software for non-free software that mistreats people in a wide variety of ways. In fact, there are now programs used for giving exams that I believe will only run on Windows and Macintosh. And they take total control of the computer. They insist that nothing else run on the computer at the same time. They watch all around. They take pictures of the room. I mean, it's basically like being in 1984. Now, these companies should be illegal. What they do should be a crime. They should go to prison for that. But few governments try to protect the freedom of individuals against companies that are making a lot of money. And it's been a very difficult fight. If it were me, I would say, if I were the student, I would say, I'll take an exam with that software if it's running on the school's computer. I'll go to the school, I'll go into a room which no one else can enter, and you can search me before I go in if you like,
And then I'll take the exam with whatever software you like. After all, you're the victims of that software, not me. And I think that's okay for taking an exam for a few hours. After all, taking an exam, an important exam, tends to be a somewhat controlled experience, which you do in a special place and for a specific reason. Okay, I can compromise with that, but I will not allow malicious software like that onto my computer, ever. So basically, I have to say, give me the exam on the school's computer or I can't take it. Now, faced with spreading systems of control and subjection, what do? We have to start with individual resistance. Refusing to have a computer with Windows, refusing to have a computer with the Mac OS on it, without refusing to have a snoop phone, are important methods of resistance. And people have to start applying them and organizing to apply them to the schools that direct people towards servitude. Schools should be building a strong, capable, cooperating, and free society. And the ones that are working directly against this, we can't let them continue. Because if they do continue, we know that where that will take society. It leads to a society where everybody is tracked and identified all the time, in which freedom is at the mercy of any power-seeking politician who wants to get people upset about some usually imaginary threat. And politicians are very good at distracting people this way. And the politicians that are against distracting people this way, they're not so many. You have to have courage to stand for that kind of position, and you have to be able to do without the money that the businesses want to give you. And it's hard to win without that money. This is the general threat to democracy. So what we find is that the free software movement takes a place in the general campaign in society for freedom and democracy. And there are many other areas of life where we have to fight for that. But we can't omit the area of software and computing now that almost everybody is in that area using software and computing. It's not something we can treat as a side issue. We have to fight for it. There has recently been a lot of panic about so-called artificial intelligence. Now, there is some real artificial intelligence. People are, however, confusing artificial intelligence with trained neural nets that generate text or art. People are talking about ChatGPT as if that were artificial intelligence, and they are completely mistaken about what ChatGPT can actually do. They look at the output of ChatGPT, and because it looks like what can be said by a real intelligence, they assume there's intelligence there. But something generating words that speak as if it were intelligent doesn't mean it is intelligent. I believe that intelligence implies the ability to understand some things. Even if it's only within a limited domain, There has to be the ability to actually understand things and actually know things. And of course, beyond that is the capacity to be a person, which requires having volition, desires, conscious goals, and the ability to make plans and carry them out. ChatGPT can speak as if it did all those things, but it doesn't do any of them. It understands exactly zero. It knows exactly zero. It may speak as if it had volition, but it has none. It may speak as if it had friends, while having in fact none. It's not capable of the kind of thinking that is needed to be a friend, or know anybody, or have a friend, or anything like that. And many people just take it at face value and they believe what it says. We need to, in order to use anything like ChatGPT without being suckered, we need to keep in mind all it knows how to do is string together words in a smooth sounding way. You might call it a double talk generator. And apparently it's very good at making smooth sounding text. But it has no idea whether the things stated in that text are true. It's not capable of knowing anything. It doesn't even try. It doesn't think about such things. It just makes smooth sounding text that resembles in some way perhaps text that was written earlier by others about whatever topic. So things like ChatGPT are not artificial intelligence, although they can do some things. There is some artificial intelligence that does some useful things. And some of it is implemented using machine learning and trained neural nets. But they, in order to be intelligent, they have to solve real problems and solve them pretty well. So that exists. I don't think it's a threat to humanity at this point. ChatGPT, because it has no volition, can't make plans, can't carry them out. You know, the scenarios where an AI decides to do something in order, for instance, to turn the whole world into paperclips, is one hypothetical idea. How an innocent-sounding goal given to an AI could lead to disaster if the AI is smart and powerful enough in the real world that it can carry out its plans. But some have said that machine learning has already caused a disaster because it's used in the recommendation engines of anti-social media. The ones that decide that learn what to show people in order to maximize how much time they spend using the system. And they found that fascist disinformation is extremely effective for that. And it's promoting fascism all around the world. It's promoting ignoring the truth. If you believe whatever you hear from a certain group of people, they can lie all the time and you'll believe whatever lie they say. And there are millions of people who do this. And once a person has lost the idea of connection with the truth, it's very hard to convince such a person that person is believing lies all the time. Those people don't have a standard to judge against anymore. So maybe machine learning has already caused disaster for humanity because it's being used by powerful, amoral corporations. And ultimately, it's powerful amoral corporations that are the root of this disaster, and machine learning systems are a tool that they use. So, and what about the hypothetical future AI that could be intelligent like a human being? We can't predict what they will do. It's fundamentally impossible because they would be smarter than we. They could think rings around us. They could make subtle plans that we would never catch on to until it was too late. So how could we prevent that? There are people who for more than 10 years have been trying to figure out a way to develop friendly AI. I don't know what progress they've made. I do know that various science fiction books have widely varying scenarios about what could happen. And I don't think we can rule out any of those scenarios. And I'm sure there are many others that people haven't imagined yet. So we can't hope to make plans, in my opinion. We can't hope to make plans now for what would keep us safe from human intelligence level AIs. Maybe if some AIs are on our side, they would help us make such plans. On the other hand, they could be lying to us very effectively. With another human being, we can have some basis to know we can trust some people a certain length. We can also be fooled, even when dealing with other humans. When dealing with an AI, it wouldn't be hard for an AI to imagine, what would I say to this person if I were honest? And say exactly that. The simplest thing in the world, make an alternative scenario, run yourself in that scenario, look at the output, and figure out how to change it. By the way, I read a science fiction story raising the question of whether those recursive invocations of intelligent programs deserve human rights. If an AI deserves human rights from being a person of a kind, then what about the recursive invocations? Should they just be deleted when they've done their jobs? I believe it was called Stones of Significance. It was a very troubling philosophical question. Now, how does this relate to free software? The idea of free software and the free software movement is that users deserve control of the programs that they use. Now, this wouldn't apply to an AI that was a person, because a person exists for herself. That AI is what should have control over its code. The rest of us, we have no right to, just as I have no right to do brain control on you, right? You're an autonomous person, and you have rights just as I have. No one should have that level no person should have that level of power over another person. But what about the AIs that don't have agency, that aren't persons, that don't have their own goals? Well, will be developed to be used by persons. But the question is, then the persons that own them, what control should they have? should you be able, if you buy an AI program or get allowed to use an AI system, should you have control over it? I believe that you must. It's computing, and in this case, it's your computing, and you are entitled to have control over how it gets done. However, the companies developing AI systems nowadays mostly make them proprietary, and likewise for the neural network systems, the machine learning systems, whether they're AIs or not, most of them are not released at all. ChatGPT is unreleased software. It's an example of service as a software substitute. It runs in computers that don't belong to you. You're, in some cases, allowed to send a command and get back the results. But you can't even get a copy of that program, let alone freely change it. So it's an injustice. Accepting that it is something made for humans and groups of humans to use, it is offered to them on unjust terms that are even worse than a non-free program. Remember, a non-free program you can get an executable of typically. You can run it, you just don't get the source code, so it's very hard for you to make any. You can't even have a copy of an executable. All you can do is send a command to someone else's copy, which will then run it and send you an answer. And of course, the owner of that can distort it, spy on it, whatever that owner wishes to do to you, it can do. So you can never trust a system like that. The ones whose source code has been released under extremely restrictive licenses that prohibit many kinds of uses. Well, if you can't use the program freely, you don't have freedom in the use of that program. That's freedom zero, the freedom to run the program as you wish. Typically, they're released under licenses that have very strict and numerous restrictions on what users are allowed to do with them. Now, the people doing this mean well, and they are not supporters of free software. But the solution they think they're using is not, it's insufficient, it won't do any good, because it will be easily pushed aside by the big companies that can get access to or develop their own machine learning systems and thus not be restricted by these conditions. So if you can't restrain the most powerful from doing some kind of wrong, you're not going to do much good against that kind of wrong. So that direction is basically futile. What we need, if there's something that we want to stop everyone from doing with machine learning, we need to do it with a law that will apply to every user, including big corporations, including billionaires. Now, that is not necessarily a simple job either. After all, corporations break laws frequently. Often the laws are written so that individuals won't get punished. It's often corporations are frequently caught and fined for breaking laws, and they just go back and do it again because they make more money. They make so much money they can pay the fines. Maybe the European Union will raise the fines to a point where corporations can't just do that anymore. But it takes firmness. So that might prevent the dangerous activities. It won't be easy also because such corporations might operate in other countries, and it gets to be complicated. We have also seen that when lots of people want to break the law, and when it's not, if it's a crime that doesn't immediately have an individual victim, you will find millions of people breaking that law. For instance, smuggling cocaine and opiates. This goes on all the time. And just making a law against something doesn't make it cease, and can cause tremendous social problems at the same time. This is why I don't advocate a law making non-free software illegal, because it would cause the problems that such laws generally cause. You make marijuana illegal. Well, I think marijuana should be lawful. But if you make it illegal, you find lots of people getting imprisoned for illegally selling marijuana. And likewise, if you pick a very dangerous drug, such as fentanyl, and there's still people smuggling it, it's very profitable after all, and lots of harm is done by the prohibition, and harm is also done by the drug. Prohibition of whatever is not a simple, easy solution. But in the case of network systems, it might be more effective, because those who would do the most harm using them are powerful, and the powerful corporations play a central role in giving those systems an opportunity, for instance, to spread disinformation. Companies like Twitter. So maybe you could actually enforce a law about that. Of course, there are other moral problems that arise too. Designing such a law is not an easy job. My point is that replacing that law with a software license, a non-free software license, doesn't make it easier and will not be effective anyway. Now, one question raised by machine learning systems that use a trained neural net, which is how they generally work, is what is the source code? If you want to release one with source code, so it's free software, the question is, what constitutes the source code for a bunch of data that acts as a program that has been produced by some sort of calculation and doesn't come from any kind of source code that any people have written? It turns out that you can modify the trained neural net by running a training program some more and giving it different examples, so you can train it to act differently. What this means is that the neural network itself, the values of the nodes in the network, act as source code, because you can modify it the way you want to. So my conclusion is the neural network, it's the trained neural network, that is the data points that go in the nodes of the neural network. They are the source code for themselves, because it's practical, feasible to modify them to do a different thing. Well, that solves that problem. You don't need to have the original training data set that would allow you to reproduce the training and get an equivalent neural network. You don't need that in order to make a slightly different one. You just need the original trained neural network. You don't have to repeat the original training, you just do the incremental training to make it different. And this makes it possible to release trained neural network systems as free software. But not if the neural network is so enormous that ordinary users couldn't possibly do retraining on it. I don't have a solution for that, but it may be that those are so dangerous that it's better if they don't exist. So we should take care not to follow the people who ignore the distinctions I've been trying to draw, because they're thinking in a sloppy way and they are reaching wild conclusions. Often they think that things like ChatGPT will naturally develop into the kind of powerful super intelligences that could endanger humanity by deciding to turn us all into paperclips or whatever else. But there are real dangers, and there are both governments and corporations that would gladly use the power that they get from limited artificial intelligence systems to oppress people. No shortage of those. So schools tend to confront these systems because they're concerned with the possibility of cheating. I think that schools will find solutions for this, like asking people to write an exam with a pen without a computer. It's a pretty straightforward solution. It's not quite convenient enough to do it with few teachers. If what they want to do is fire most of the teachers, this won't help them do it. But the danger we face right now is that the school will make you talk with the other students using a non-free program that snoops on people and censors, something like Zoom. I expect that Google Meet can snoop on people somehow. You have to have an account. If you have to have an account and identify yourself to use the system, that is already too much. And I advocate a law that prohibits schools from letting data about individual students out of the school to any entity other than the school, aside from a transcript of grades when the student asks for it to be sent. Anything beyond that should have to be studied by society and approved or not. Now, you'll find that many kinds of non-free or unjust or cloudy systems are supposedly protected safe because they have to ask the user for consent. This runs into the problem I call manufacture of consent. Of course, I'm borrowing a term used by political thinkers before for something else. The point is, if you have powerful institutions and practices in society that tell people, you had better use this system or get lost, then it's going to be hard for those people to refuse to consent. If you're asked to make an account on Zoom and Zoom says, we're going to do these things to you, do you consent? Well, if you're going to get fired if you don't, if you're going to get kicked out of school or failed if you don't, then those persons don't have much choice. They can't freely deny consent. So the consent is meaningless. And if you look around, you will find that people are constantly, most people, not me, are constantly consenting to various kinds of mistreatment because the other organizations and powers that they deal with in their lives, including sometimes the government, demands it and insists on it. So we have to change laws to make sure that never happens. I've read that many employees are required to install non-free trying software for the employer. And this software will do things like take photos of them frequently to make sure they never take any time away from working. Wonder what happens if any of them needs to pee. And once being treated like a machine becomes normal in one aspect of your life, it's hard for people to think of it as unacceptable in other aspects. So at this point, maybe it would be good to give others a chance to ask me questions.
You will start with
Oh, but we're going to start with the other two.
You just spoke about artificial intelligence and
Quiet please, everyone, because I want to hear what Marco said.
And you give a solution about the problem of distributing source code of an artificial intelligence, saying a simple thing that you can distribute the software, distributing not the original data set that was trained, but the coefficient of a really trained intelligence. And
I didn't hear that. The last few words I didn't hear. Could you repeat the last few words?
You said that to distribute an artificial intelligence as a software, you can distribute the software, the main software, and also the data.
The trained neural network.
Yeah, exactly. But if you do that, of course, you expect the way free software is released. But what about the data, the original data set that was used to train the AI? The original data set cannot be explained. Because you cannot know from the coefficient what are the data that was used to train it. And if the data are not non-free data or free data, if that data contains personal data or commercial data, you cannot know that. So in a software, you will end distributing non-free data or commercial data or things like that.
I don't think so. The training data is not crucial to release because it's not part of the system that's developed. It was used before, but it's not being used when the system is running. It doesn't have to be there. Now, of course, if that is personal data, it can't be released.
for the sake of the privacy of the people it's about. Oh, by the way, I should point out that when I said that, I said machine learning systems or trained neural networks. I did not say AIs, because most of them I would say are not AIs. I make that distinction carefully. I will use the term artificial intelligence only to talk about a system that can know things and understand things. So ChatGPT is not an artificial intelligence. I won't call it one. Some trained neural networks, if they're figuring out specific information, in some sense, maybe they do understand something. So maybe they are rather limited AIs, but maybe they are AIs, albeit rather limited. So let's be careful not to treat those terms as indistinguishable. But anyway, I don't think that it is crucial to give users of a free machine learning system the training data. I don't think the users need to get the training data. Now, what are some things they might think of doing with that training data? Suppose they're concerned about bias in the data that might teach the machine learning system to act with the same bias. Well, it can do that. But you don't need to look at the training data to see if that happens. You just have to run the system and look at the results. And if you run, say, 10,000 tests, then, well, you can see whether it's treating blacks and whites differently or men and women differently. You don't need to know why, because when you know it is, you say this system's not good. It has to be fixed. So how can you fix it? Well, one way might be for the developers to start over. But another way might be to do subsequent training with unbiased data or partly counter-biased data and cancel it out. I mean, so the point is that this is not a reason why the public needs to see all the training data. In fact, you can be almost certain that training such a system on real-life data will produce a biased system, because our society is biased, so real-life data has bias in it, so anything done with that data is going to show the same biases. But fortunately, we can detect that and try to correct that without getting all of the private, personal data that was used.
Thanks, Richard. You have a lot of questions to ask.
Oh, Francesco. You should use a microphone. Oops.
Okay, going to the question of university and research and academic software. I remember that some years ago it was normal for university to use free software, and the things have been eroding, changing slowly in time, and I see that more and more proprietary software is used in research institutions and academic institutions. Apparently, this happens because, apparently from the point of view, resources. That is, things become ever more complex and integrated, and they need ever more resources to be built and to be made to work. And this would require investments at the highest level, that is at the infrastructure level, at the national, international level. But there are economic pushes to do otherwise. So the fact is that technically it is difficult or impossible to use free software for big distribution unless there are great investments, and we don't see that. So this is my idea and my view that I would like opinions on this issue.
I have a little experience about this. I suppose others will have responses to this, so I will be brief. Professor Sussman, who is a colleague of mine, I've worked with him for many years, and he is a free software activist. He's on the Free Software Foundation's board of directors. He is a founder, along with me. Well, he uses free software as much as he can get away with. For instance, when he teaches his classes, he doesn't use Zoom. He uses a free program, BigBlueButton, which has the advantage that you can use it with a browser and you don't need to install an app. But the server program is free also. I use that for giving talks sometimes. But sometimes there are meetings of faculty that he goes to, he participates in, and they impose the use of Zoom. And he tells me this is often about how to deal with a certain student. And because if it's his student, he wants to get good treatment for the student, and therefore he will run Zoom. Now, I would just say, I'm sorry, you've excluded me. He feels that it's his duty to be in those meetings. But you see, you can be a free software activist. His research also is based on free software. So it's not impossible for individual professors or researchers to say, I'm going to do this with free software only. But the problem is that the university's structures may be demanding you use non-free software for things that are not research at all. And this takes people to push. I think if there were 5 other professors who would say, it's unacceptable to make us use Zoom. Let's switch to BigBlueButton. We can have a meeting that way, that it would happen. Because that would be enough. But one person can't do it. So it's a matter of organizing the people who have some power in the institution. There are probably other people who want to respond to Francesco.
I don't know if there are any opinions on
Oh, if you have a response to give, please come to the mic. Oh, I see, it's a mask. Good, thank you.
Okay, so I think this is a more systemic problem, not just in university. And one of the roots, I think it's linked in how developers tend to think now when writing software. There's a distaste for simplicity and small programs, which tends to create big programs that are almost impossible to maintain by individuals, so you need company structure. Needs company and so on. And because because of this, time can't catch up. But if developers valued more simplicity above else, this could create a culture where it is easy to spread free software, and it is easy to create systems that do not need big companies, or at least company structure groups to maintain them. However, we have to value independence and small reliability above superficial features that might, in the short term, come in handy, but in the long term, create a bigger and complex. That's my opinion on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, comment on this issue. The problem with big organization, like the network of the university or the seminar, just to speak about academic institutions, is that they need complex software. It's not something that an individual programmer can do. It's something that should be done at an infrastructure level. Infrastructure level means either public owned or private owned company or organization, which in fact exists. But if a public owned company, like we have in Bologna, Mega, or the GAR, which manages the network infrastructure, CNR, these are organizations that are not companies, but they are public organizations that can and do create complex software. And most of this is free software. But if they are not adequately enough funded, they cannot compete with big private organizations which spend a lot of resources to create big infrastructure. That was my initial point, which maybe was not clear.
I think that it's part of the government's responsibility to make sure that these things are developed as free software and not leave a hole in the wall that lets the non-free developers dominate a part of society. That's what government is for, to make sure that the society stays free, and which calls for not allowing a vulnerability for someone to get power over lots of. So, should I start answering these questions? I'm sorry, I can't. What did you say?
You can stop.
Oh, okay.
There are lots of questions, and the results are very...
Okay, first I would like to mention that 2 days ago I was in Cosenza. I gave a talk, and while I was there, I noticed something a little bit unusual. And it occurred to me that since I was about to go to Pisa, I should take a photo of it. This is the leaning tree of Cosenza. So, I'll take some simple questions. First, I am currently writing an intermediate representation for a compiler. May I use the LGPL license? Well, first of all, it's up to you what license you use. If you want to make it free software, you release it, and some people may actually want to use, well, first of all, intermediate representation is not code, it's structure. And it's not clear that a structure has anything that would be copyrighted. Question. So, if you clarify for me, do you writing implement code to code then? You could release it under the GNU General Public License, GNU GPL, or you could release it under the GNU General Public License. I would release it under the GNU General Public License, the regular one. I would release it under version 3 or any later version of the GNU GPL. And the reason is I would want to say this code is available for use in a free compiler, but if you're making a non-free compiler, get lost. I don't want to help improve non-free compilers. They are somewhere between the competition and the enemy. So why help them? Libraries, which we just need to allow to be used in non-free programs. If the non-free systems come with libraries that are proprietary but can be used in any application, we have to have libraries that are free but can be used in any application. And that's what I wrote the lesser GPL for. It's basically, instead of defending liberty strongly as possible, it makes a compromise so that we can compete with the proprietary libraries. Usually we use the lesser GPL for libraries that are competing with non-free libraries. They're compatible. So for instance, is released under the operating system has to have a libc that is standardized. We add some things that are not in the standard. We may do that too. We may have the same extensions. The point is that we would be hurting our own cause if we said our libc can only be linked to couldn't run on our system at all, and that would cause us to lose out. Now, this is a rather specialized reason. Normally, you shouldn't use the lesser GPL. If there isn't a strong case that you need to, then you shouldn't. You'll find a lot of people who think that being helpful to non-free software is the thing to do. I think that's entirely mistaken. It comes from not being clear on the goal. I say the goal is move the world to free software and give all users freedom. So that's done. Why doesn't America agree on European privacy law, the GDPR? Well, I can only speculate about that. I'm not part of those decisions, but I suspect it's because companies like Google and Amazon have tremendous political influence. They fund political campaigns. Now, I call that corruption. It was imposed by plutocratist justices of the Supreme Court that said that corporations have a right to the same right to donate that individuals have. I think that's utterly foolish. Corporations don't deserve human rights. Morally speaking, they're not entitled to human rights because they're not human. They're not persons really at all. It was convenient for certain legal purposes to say that corporations can be treated like persons. But really, that should be true only to the extent that it's good for society to do so. However, we are afflicted with a decision that is hard to change and that enables many kinds of corporations to dictate political decisions. Mining companies donate lots of money to legislators so that they will protect mining companies' right to pollute and kill people. Big oil, the same. Big agriculture, the same. And this corrupts U.S. politics in every area. It's now taken for granted in U.S. politics that you don't punish companies for doing something that hurts the public. Instead, you offer them some subsidy for not doing those things. Now, of course, if you keep on going in this approach, the government ends up being broke. Now, if it taxed companies heavily for doing the bad things, it would have a lot more money. So basically, that's why the U.S. hasn't adopted European privacy law, although there is a push to do so. But I have to say that the GDPR, although they do some good, are fundamentally based on an error. It is based on the assumption that companies have data. And the question is what they should do with that data, what they should be allowed to do, what requirements should be placed on them. Well, I think that is failing to fight the first battle. It's surrendering, it's abandoning the first battle and letting the enemy win by default. The first thing to do is stop companies from getting data. That's the way you really protect privacy. If they don't know who you are, that's privacy. Now, in the GNU project, we are developing something called gnu+linux, which is an anonymous payment system. It is anonymous for the payer, but the payee is always identified, meaning that you can buy something and the company can't tell who purchased it. But the fact that the company received the payment will be known. So power cannot be used for hiding wealth or evading taxes. For more information, look at taler.net. We say that systems that permit power payments are tolerable, and the others are intolerable. Now, Tower is developed, and now the work being done is getting it into some banks and so that people pay that will be able to never make digital payments. Never. Cash. If I want to buy something, I'll pay with these or the equivalent in some other card because they're anonymous. The only exceptions are for airline tickets because they won't allow things on long distance train tickets. That was imposed supposedly to control travel for COVID. Now Italy has followed most other countries in ignoring COVID-19 encouraging people to think that they're danger anymore. More people weren't any COVID-19. So, okay, if the motive is gone, what people have to demand it. People have to demand and once collected will be abused. And there are many accounts. For instance, the organization database could intentionally abuse it. Illegal, if the government's doing it, who knows, right? The GDPR makes some protections, but they don't apply where it's at stake, meaning, for instance, cops, prosecution. You're not safe from prosecution for whatever purpose, including prosecution by right-wingers who want to suppress dissent. So, but then what if the organization doesn't choose to endanger privacy? Rogue employees can get the data and mistreat people. This is common. It's something that cops do, for instance. Another is the organization could make a mistake and leak the data to the net, or crackers, people who break security or malicious, typically for malicious purposes. I don't call them hackers, by the way. Hackers like me who like to explore interesting possibilities in technical systems. The people who break security just so they can get things are crackers. So crackers exist, and we keep reading about data breaches caused by cracking. Well, that can happen to your data too. It's less likely to happen to mine because there are a lot of databases I am not in, because I've never done the things that would get me in them. If they steal the database about digital payments, there's nothing in there about me unless it's from an airline. So, the data, once accumulated in a database, will almost surely be misused, and therefore we should limit the collection of data in databases, especially, for instance, facial recognition, or using any character, visible or audible or smellable characteristics of people to recognize them outside of very limited situations should be totally illegal. I believe the only exception should be under a specific court order permitting, for instance, facial recognition in a limited space for a limited period of time. But any organization that tries to systematically collect pictures of people should be prosecuted for that. And that includes individuals and businesses. There's a business in the US that is recognizing people's faces in a lot of places on the street and making records that are then sold to customers about who was seen where. And Amazon, with its video snooping cameras pointed at the street, is doing something similar. They're called Ring, and they like to call them doorbells, but they're snooping cameras. And there are cities in the U.S. where the cops tell businesses, give us a feed for your security camera, or we won't come if you report a crime. But the feed is running all the time, not just if there's a crime. So they get to identify everybody who goes to a store, a supposedly private place, private establishment. Well, that is tyranny. I mean, those cops should go to prison for that. So this is why I'm not enthusiastic about European privacy rules. They were well meant. And there was a time when data about people was created by companies, but that's not true anymore. Nowadays, a large part of that data is acquired by the companies from the people who have all fallen for the manufacture of consent. You know, most people don't feel they can say no to these things, so they never really have a choice. So they can't be asked the question. They simply have a right not to track them. How do you switch from GPL3 to the lesser GPL3? Well, the answer is usually you shouldn't. Why would you want to do that? You probably somebody wants to. If we're talking about software that you wrote, why would you want to change it? It's because there are non-free software. Do you want to let them do that? Well, there are occasional cases when if you're competing against a proprietary program that they could use instead, maybe it's actually a good thing to get them to choose your free software instead of your free module, instead of some other non-free module. But in general, tell them, I'm not going to switch. You should make free software. Your software is an injustice because it's not free. And why should I help you commit that injustice? Why didn't you ever think of putting a ROM that freed the smartphone from Google? Of course, you can't do that. It isn't a ROM anyway. All that software can be written. Snoop phones, since at least 25 years ago, had all the software rewritable, and it can even be rewritten remotely. In fact, and not only that, but the phone network can track the movements of the phone without even the cooperation of the software in the phone. Of course, if the software will cooperate, the phone network can interrogate the phone and ask, what is your GPS location? But even without GPS, they can track people because the network knows which tower you're talking to. And they can use multiple towers to triangulate and locate the phone better. So I don't think you can make that acceptable. But in addition, because there's a universal backdoor in that software, they can remotely replace all the software in it. Do you think that the future will be free? I tend to be pessimistic about life. When there's a threat, I tend to fear that the threat will win. Actually, it depends on you. Are you going to fight for freedom? Fascists are taking over around the world, and there's going to be no freedom in the future. It does seem that that's what will happen if we don't organize to fight it. Of course, we could all be killed by global heating disaster, too. I know places in Italy where it's pretty clear that 100 years from now, there won't be land there anymore. And people don't seem to be aware of this. Lots of cities in the Mediterranean are built basically just barely above sea level. And that was more or less okay in the past, not now. Why is it still more difficult to buy a new computer with free software than the new one with non-free software? Well, that's because Microsoft, for many years, gave a lower price for, and basically encouraged companies to deliver computers with Windows. But now it has gone further than that. Now there are various things in a PC that restrict what you can run on it. Now this should be illegal. It should be illegal to sell a computer that stops users, the purchaser, the user, from installing a different operating system. It should be illegal to have any secrets that block you from installing a new operating system of choice. It should be illegal to have secrets that make it hard to write an operating system that will run on a computer. If a computer is being mass produced and sold in quantity, then that should be illegal, because people should have the right to change the software that runs in their computers. But Microsoft actually has control over what can be booted in the PC. And I think Intel does too. And these systems are all described as being for security, but it's the security of the companies rather than the security of the user. A different kind of system could protect the security of the user without denying the freedom of the user. Has the development of the GNU current kernel stalled? Pretty much. The developers ran into problems which didn't have obvious solutions. Nobody had really done anything like that before. It was sort of a research project. And normally we didn't do research projects. But I thought that because we were starting with an existing base, that it wouldn't be so hard. Well, Torvalds demonstrated that writing a monolithic kernel could succeed much faster. Well, this question uses a word I refuse to use. It's the word monetize. I find that word disgusting because it seems to imply that the purpose of doing everything is to turn it into money. So I use the word monetize in its traditional sense, which is to use something as currency. And I won't use it in any other way. But what would be an ethical way to make money from free software? Actually, many different methods have been used and have worked for people. In the 1980s, I sold copies of free software on magnetic tapes. And then after I started the Free Software Foundation, I figured the FSF should make the money that way. And it did for many years. There are people who have businesses where they write free software and they do it for a price. And we sometimes ask for bids to write a piece of free software. Then there are, and this is quite common in web development. If you choose to start with a basis that's free software, you can easily write some more free software to do what the individuals with the specific site wants. And I have a friend who's been in that business for around 6 years as part of a cooperative. And support and training can also be good businesses. So, and there are others. There is no one business model for the free world. Which operating system are you using or would you recommend? I use the gnu+linux operating system. Specifically, I use a distro called Freescale because it's a totally free distro. There is no non-free software in Freescale. It won't give you an easy way. It won't need you to install any program that is not free. Now, on a free system, you can install whatever you want. The free system can't stop you from doing anything. Whatever you want to do, you can do. But our moral criterion is that the free distro should never invite you to install non-free software. It should never encourage you. The possibility exists, but a free system should not lead you in that direction. Because if it does, then it is morally responsible for the fact that those users accepted the invitation. Look at gnu.org/distros for more information about which distros are free, which ones are not, and why not, and our precise criteria for judging. One important criterion that might not be obvious is that before we will endorse a distro as free, we have to get a promise from the developers that if they find any non-free software, they remove it. The reason is there are likely thousands of packages in a system distro. It's too much to demand that people never make a mistake. So instead, we insist that they promise to fix the mistake if they make one. By the way, we need people to volunteer and help us. We being the GNU project, and also to some extent the Free Software Foundation. If you want to join in and help, please take a look at gnu.org/help. It lists many kinds of work that we ask for volunteers to do. And it's not just writing software. Please do not make the mistake of saying, well, I'm not a programmer, so I can't possibly help. That's not true. You can help by doing something else. For instance, we need people in certain kinds of administration and management. And the GNU project is a pretty big project. Coordinating it takes some effort. And we have groups of people that do this. You don't need to be able to write a line of code to be able to help in that. We need people to write manuals. We need webmasters. There are all sorts of things you could do to help us. So please look at gnu.org/help and see the kinds of help we need. How to handle inconvenience government requirements for Snoop phones and apps. Okay, there's something here I've never heard of. SPID/CIO. I don't know what those are.
SPID is the Italian Public System for User Identification. It is an electronic ID card.
Okay, well, I don't know the details of it. I don't know what problems it has. Clearly, in order for a system like that to be morally acceptable, it has to be implemented by free software, at least in terms of the things users have to get and run. Now, things that the government, software that the government runs, or that you run privately, that some company runs privately, don't really have to be released software at all. It's perfectly fine if you write a program and use it yourself in your computers and never give a copy to anyone. In fact, that in a trivial sense is free software, because all the users have the four freedoms. Every user, every one user, there's only one user. All the users have, so it's free. And if a government develops a program and runs it without giving copies to anyone, that's also in a trivial way free software. The thing that the public are being asked to download and run, they must be free software. And my policy, when a government agency tries to ask me to free program, what that non-free program is, I say, I can't do that. I'm in office and go. And bureaucratic step in person. And it's more work. But it doesn't have to be done terribly often. And there are indeed some things you have to do with the government where it is important for the government to identify you. However, I wouldn't start doing this digitally until the digital system for doing it is no worse than the old-fashioned system for doing this. And by the way, there should not be one ID number for all the things you do with the government. A national ID code is a basis for tyranny. And I have fought against that. And why is it a basis for tyranny? Because once there's a convenient single national ID number for everybody, the easiest thing for any organization to do is to identify people by that same number. I was told that the municipal swimming pools of Barcelona identify members, people who are paid for the use of the swimming pool, by their national ID numbers. So the result, and I'm sure that's just one example, there must be thousands of other organizations in Spain that identify people by demanding a national ID number. which means that all these databases are pre-correlated. If you find out somebody's national ID number, you can easily find that person in all these different paradise for agents of repression. So I believe that one constitutional principle should be that there should never be an ID number that except that is defined for one specific purpose. And once it exists for that specific purpose, it must never be used for other purposes. Another organization that wants to keep track of you should give you its own ID number for you. Yeah.
In Italy, we have something called codice fiscale, which is fiscal code.
Yeah.
Which basically contains your name, your surname, your date of
Yeah.
birth.
And this is used basically to keep track of when people are paying you, right?
Not just that. Well, not just that. Last time I had a call to also 22.
So a few days ago, I was trying information from and the first thing
know about the what?
Huh?
To know about
the tariffs of the mobile company. How much do you need to pay for the
Oh, I see.
And the first they say, oh, you have a fiscal code. I said, well, no, I'm not going to give you my fiscal code because that contains all my personal information that you can use anywhere. I'm just asking for information. You don't need to identify me.
Yeah.
And they put me on hold and they hang up. I tried again and they did the same.
Oh, well, that should be illegal, of course.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
I know.
It is kind of illegal because of GDPR, because GDPR also gives you the right of, well, organization to comply with GDPR. They shouldn't take more information than they need.
And they don't need any for this.
Exactly. But they're doing it, and unfortunately nobody's punishing. No, the Italian privacy commissioner, you can report it, but they're not going to do anything about it. So it's, in theory, yes, there are laws against it, but in practice, no one respects them and no one fights them for it. Yeah.
Basically, one general consequence of computerization of many activities is that people are likely to be mistreated, cheated. No human beings involved in a transaction. If anything goes wrong, there's no one who can fix it. And you can be screwed for months and denied, for instance, a refund when a confusion cheated you. There's no one, they'll say, oh, we'll take a look at this. And months go by and you hear nothing. Meanwhile, you're getting billed for something you never bought. It's just likely. Phone number validation with Vaughn. I don't know what that is. Does anyone know what that is?
I think that was still me.
So, and that's not just in Italy, that's everywhere. At least they say so, but you provide the fact that you are a unique user. The problem is that, for instance, in the UK, you can buy prepaid cards, but with cash. You can just buy a SIM card and then use it on your phone, and no one can identify you from that, which is great. But in Italy, to be able to have a free SIM card with a phone number attached to it, you need to give you all your details, your passport or a national identity card, etc. So it's directly with the operators and try to phone them to and give them your codice fiscale to be able to get that. So,
well, since I don't have a portable phone, in some sense, I'm safe from that problem. But in another sense, many organizations just wouldn't deal with me at all unless they would use someone else's portable phone number. So there may be things in Italian life that I couldn't do at all. I hope that something like, for instance, making signing a contract to get electricity wouldn't require me to do that because I have no electricity. Unless someone else could do it for me. You know, if I were living in a room in someone's house and I never needed to deal with that company, I guess I could get by.
You actually need phone number to be able to go into the electricity contract.
And does that phone number have to be mine? Because it couldn't be mine.
I usually use my girlfriend one.
Oh.
But in theory, if I didn't have my available girlfriend to share it, then it would have been mine. You know, it wouldn't need to be mine.
Yeah. So I only have a landline. Now maybe they would accept a landline.
Probably, yeah.
So
the problem is that people listening from online, from
oh, I see. If they wouldn't have heard it.
they would hear people speaking.
Yeah. So anyone who's going to speak has to come.
I don't remember my answer on my question.
I guess it's okay. It's only one little point in the talk, but we should remember this. What do you think about the free usage of medical data for research purposes of public interest? That is a difficult issue because on the one hand, that research can be very useful in helping improving medicine. But on the other, it can be used to harm people. Insurance companies would like to use it in order to deny people insurance. Well, it's not as big a problem in Italy because Italy has a national medical system. In the US, this is a terrible problem. It's just one part of the terrible problem we have because we don't have a national medical system. And this is a political battle that has been going on for a number of years now. Some of us demand a national medical system. Basically, businesses that profit from gouging people under the existing U.S. medical system are paying politicians not to adopt one. And the politicians don't say, I'm going to vote against the national medical system because those companies that fund me would not make money anymore. I think they shouldn't exist. I think they should be wiped out. I don't think there should be a for-profit hospital. I think they should all be non-profit, and what they charge should be strictly regulated. But in any case, those politicians won't admit what they're really working for, but we can see lots of evidence in the donations their campaigns got for private contributions. We've seen this corruption even in the judges of the Supreme Court recently. So I guess if you didn't need any kind of insurance that was so crucial, then that danger would be less. But we shouldn't allow that data ever to get into the hands of any company. And it shouldn't be, also in the US, there's a privacy law, a so-called privacy law for medical records. But it has so many exceptions that excuse the government to demand a copy of your medical records. It abolished the old idea of doctor-patient privilege. It used to be that courts couldn't ask a doctor to testify about a patient's medical conditions. But that's essentially obsolete because all the medical conditions will now be in medical records that the government can get, or it has to present some justification in the specific case, but there are many kinds of justification that will be sufficient to get the data that in the past would have been covered by doctor-patient privilege. However, clinics now use that as an excuse to refuse to communicate by email. They say email is not secure enough. So they say that the patient should make an account on their, quote, secure patient portal, unquote, and to use it requires running non-free software. Those websites, like many others, send JavaScript code to the user's browser, and if you won't run, and it's non-free, if you won't run non-free JavaScript code, because you tell, for your freedom's sake, you tell the browser not to run it, then you can't use those. They also have terms of service that I would never agree to. Should we avoid making free software programs complex so we can avoid a company structure by maintaining and spreading free software? Well, actually, that problem may exist, but don't think that the free software community can't make complicated programs. The GNU compiler is very complicated. We have a structure of people, some of whom work for companies, and some of whom are volunteers, and we continue maintaining it. We have lots of very complicated programs that we maintain, that were developed in the community. But, indeed, if you could do a job with a simple program, that's probably better on general principles. But you shouldn't think that that when a program just has to be complex. I now know of two it looks, if you look at health.org, another one about so in any case, in practice, especially say if a may just be too hard for ordinary programmers. That doesn't mean it has to be so complicated. You use a VPN service on your computer. Once in a while I do, but only for very special purposes, and it's run software, and I use it early to some machines. For networks, and that's better than a VPN because it means there's no in a position to know what it's not connecting to. in the quote Internet of Things unquote, generally refer to that as the Internet of Things or the Internet of Things. Era. Well, that's things. I don't in my house to connect to operation. If it's going to be a digital appliance, I want to be able to tell it directly what I want it to do, not and not give it the chance to tell anything to some other entity or get commands from some other entity. So if a device is quote, connected unquote, that means it's not working for me. Okay. The question continues. That human authentication and brain enhancement become just a danger with non-free. It's that simple. You can't trust a non-free program. It's working for someone else who normally does not have your and is probably willing to use it against you as it becomes profitable. Remember, it's a corporation. Probably, almost always it is a corporation. And a corporation is a kind of psychopath. It has no morals. Most humans have an idea of right and wrong. They have consciences. And there's bad, nasty things they wouldn't do to you. People who know you. But a corporation fundamentally is not, it doesn't have a conscience. You can only trust it as far as you can throw it. And I don't think you can throw Google very far. So I would say brain interfaces have to be implemented with free software. Now, I am not one to risk running software with changes I have written myself, because I do make mistakes. I would want to be able to get someone to check it, check my changes before I use them. But I wouldn't want some company to be allowed to make changes. And I would want to make sure that no changes could be installed in that machine behind my back, which is standard practice nowadays for mal things. You said earlier you have no phone. That's not, I don't have a portable phone. I have a landline. Can you consider using one with a free software OS? I think I've explained why that's not enough to protect you. For one thing, it's on most or maybe all phones, it's possible remotely to rewrite the software in the phone. And, well, the Librem phone doesn't permit that. Its hardware doesn't allow remote installation of changes. So that danger can be blocked under, mostly the manufacturers don't give a damn, but that in principle can be blocked. The other fundamental danger that the phone's movements can be tracked, that's inherent in the communication system between the phone and the network. So I guess if you only use it to connect to Wi-Fi and you never use a cellular network, well, that's blocked, except that if normally you can't find the Wi-Fi network that won't identify you, at least not very easily. You can find them in restaurants, cafes, bars, some of them. The thing is, if it won't tell you when you're getting a call, it's not very useful for its main purpose. How can we protect us from big tech's EEE or embrace, extend, extinguish? Well, I'm not, we can't perfectly protect our, better for companies to do that to a free program that has users who want it because it's free. I won't claim that anything we can do make the big tech companies utterly thwarted. But at the same time, it's clear that we still have free software projects that are going strong and that lots of people can use, and that big tech simply has not found a way to extinguish. When they contribute, that's okay, as long as what they're contributing is bona fide free software. What are your thoughts on the Fediverse? Does that mean things like GNU Social and Mastodon? Good as far as I know. It's not convenient for me to use have a network connection. I can set that. I post it there. What is your opinion on LEAN? I've never heard of it. Theorem prover. Apparently, it's a free program released by Microsoft. Well, I won't reject a free program for having been developed by Microsoft. I mean, if we really can study and change the source code, okay, why not use it? Now, they released it under a weak license, a pushover license, one that allows it to be made into proprietary software, or to be included in proprietary software. Specifically, it's the Apache 2.0 license. It's a real, anything released under the Apache 2.0 license is free software. But by not using a copyleft license, it weakens our community's protections. It's still better that it exists than if it didn't exist. But it's a missed opportunity to strengthen our community's defenses. So, by all means, use software that's under lax permissive licenses, because it is free software. It's better than the program at all. If it does what you need, use it. I would. On the other hand, when we develop under the copyleft, which is GNU GPL version 3 or later. So, paper, what's next?
A child, I see. Okay. That's a long question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Oh boy, that's long, yeah. Let's see if I can actually read this. Sorry, you need to get out of the way. I can't read it from this far away. So this is a question. Okay, in 1992, we had the first free Unix-like operating system that you could run on a PC. It was the GNU operating system plus Linux as the kernel. And so we called it GNU/Linux as the combination. Much later, some people who inexplicably hated the GNU project decided they wanted to get rid of all GNU programs and look for an excuse to stop crediting the GNU system and the GNU project because they wanted to justify calling something Linux and giving credit to nobody else. Now, those systems do have software developed by others. They're not just Linux, but none of it had to do with the GNU project, and so nobody was objecting when they stopped mentioning GNU. Well, what do I think of them? If it's all free software, then it respects your freedom. So there's no reason why you should reject them on principle. There's also no reason why you shouldn't use a GNU/Linux system, because a lot of our, first of all, there's nothing wrong with the GNU programs in it. Of course, the GNU system is bigger than the GNU programs. As we were putting together the parts necessary to have a complete system, we used every free program that was usable, and where there was no free program, we wrote one. So we ended up with some programs that were developed by the GNU project, and other programs that we found which were free, so it was okay to include them. So the GNU operating system is not just the particular packages that were developed for the GNU operating system. It's the system that we put together using things like X Windows, which was free, not developed by us. Things like the text formatter TEF, which is free but not developed by us. But all those things add up to the GNU system. In any case, what do I think about the systems which people try to remove every piece of GNU software from? Well, they're still basically derivatives of the GNU/Linux system. They removed the specific GNU packages from those, but it's still a development of the GNU+Linux system. And why go to all this trouble to avoid using GNU packages? Must be some kind of strange irrationality, but I don't need to understand it. Why won't I make another variant of the GNU General Public License catering to something or other I don't understand. I'm not interested particularly in catering to people who will who object to protecting users from hardware designed to restrict them from changing the software. I mean, evilization is an extremely evil practice, and I'm not going to compromise on that. Is there something wrong with using and developing LLVM? Well, it is free software, so fundamentally that's not wrong. On the other hand, it is unfortunate to contribute to the vulnerability of our community. The problem with Clang is that it's under a non-copyleft pushover license, which means that big tech can take it, or even smaller companies can take it and put it into a non-free compiler. And that is a bad thing. It makes us vulnerable. So if you want to advance the community's freedom, the way to do it is to contribute to GCC. I don't see any more questions here, but I don't know. I haven't looked all the way. Maria Carol, what's happening now?
No, if no one has questions, I will give some very short concluding remarks when we do a break of 5 minutes.
Well, actually...
And then you can start.
Okay, but I'd like to mention that I asked people to... actually, is Dora here? Did Dora go away? I don't see her. I want to ask Dora to get ready to do something. Because if during this break it's okay to sell something, I don't just have a book. I have a few other kinds of things in here, which I didn't take out after the end. Okay, so then, so it's, okay, maybe it's not right now. I was going to ask you to sell the stuff, but right now I should auction the book. Okay, okay, you tell me when.
So, my concluding remarks. Some days ago, I held a conference about surveillance teaching, the surveillance publishing, and I asked to the audience, do you think that surveillance concerns you? And they answered, yes, of course. Do you think that surveillance is a problem? Yes, of course. Are you willing to do something about it? For instance, change your tracking system and so on? And the majority of them answered, no, we would be uncomfortable. I am stuck in this gap. It is a gap in philosophical language between theory and practice, and between individual perspective and collective and systemic perspective. This is a huge problem for me because I somehow succeed in convincing individuals, but I am stuck at the systemic level. Some of my friends will say, because it is all your fault, because you are not a good politician, and meaning for me to that, but I also asking myself why there is not politicians smarter than I understand and know the jump, to the jump, and overcome the gap. This is for me the questions. I am not able to solve it. Thank you very much for your speech and for your suggestions. I will remain with my question. I expect someone start and then we are. Someday we'll be able to overcome the gap. In Italy, the gap is huge, and it's very difficult for us to jump it. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much to you for being here in Pisa again.
So is now the time I should do this?
Now we are at a break, short break, 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then the well-known and celebrated option of insurance system.
So I think the idea of this break is, since we're not having the event right now, I can auction this book for charity, specifically for the Free Software Foundation. This is an adorable book that needs a home. It's my book of essays, Free Software, Free Society in English, 3rd edition. And I'm going to auction it for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. And if you buy it, I'll sign it for you if you wish. So I would and when you bid, please wave your arm and shout the amount so I hear you. I have hearing problems, and if you speak quietly, or if you just if you only raise your arm and you don't say the amount, I won't know that you are bidding, and that won't do the job. So I'm going to start with 35 euros. Do I get 35 euros for this adorable book? 30, how much? What are you bidding? 40. Okay. What? How much are you bidding? Shout. 50. Well, do I get 55 or more? I got 50. Do I get 55 or more? 60. I got 60. Do I get 65 or more? I've got 60. Do I get 65 or more for this adorable book? 65.
Do you accept the bank transfer?
I can't do that here.
Okay.
However, the FSF can charge a credit card without making you run any non-free software.
Yes, I know.
Oh, well, thank you. By the way, I hope you will join the Free Software Foundation, and you can go to fsf.org and do that. And you can pay with a credit card without running any non-free software, and we won't run non-free software either to process it. It is possible. Most organizations don't go to the trouble of offering this opportunity. But by joining the FSF, you support us. That's where the organization gets most of its funds, for members. So in any case, yeah, if you're willing to write on a piece of paper what we need to know to make the charge, yeah.
You have to write
Well, you have to write down the information, and I'll take that back to Boston and give it to the FSF office.
But I have to give the money to you, not them.
Well, you don't understand. The FSF, you asked if the FSF can do it. Oh, I see, you're saying with a bank transfer.
Yes.
That's not so easy because our bank account is in the US and it's in dollars.
Okay, but you can send me a payment like
Not easily, no.
okay.
Because of the fact that it's not it would cost some extra money.
Okay.
Because yes.
I didn't know.
Bank transfers are easy for individuals within Europe, but not. So that's why I was thinking of a credit card or debit card. You can use those. In any case, I've got 60 euros. Do I get 65 or more? 65 or more for this adorable book, which I will sign. Last chance to bid 65 or more. Last chance. I've got 65. Do I get 70? 70 or more for this adorable book? I've got 70. Do I get 75? 75 or more for this adorable book? Going. Sold for 70. Please come up and pay. Yes. Here's the book. Come up later and I'll sign it for you. So I think our break has ended. What's next? Don't forget to take some stickers and put them up in the computing department and other places where they are enthralled to Microsoft or Apple. There are more stickers here. Have we finished? Okay, we're finished.
Thank you very much to all the remote listeners. We are closing the conference. Of course, we will share the recording of the conference itself. I am still stuck with my question, how to overcome the gap between individual layer and the collective one. Thank you very much indeed. See you somewhere in the world. I'm closing the conference.